Welcome to this module on cold calling. A lot of the work we do is around planning effectively, starting to think about the key messages that we're going to reach out to clients with. And we think about the steps in the process for engaging clients. But actually, sometimes you just can't beat a bit of cold calling, right? Whether that's walking through the door, whether that's making phone calls, following up on prospects that maybe you've had conversations with and it never really materialized into a sales opportunity. So actually revisiting some of those is really useful. And there are a number of ways in which we can start to think about cold calling that really help us to lean into it as a skill and a key action within your sales approach. So what I'm going to share with you now is a module that we recorded in our live sales mastermind workshops. And what I do is share 13 key principles of cold calling that really start to help you think about the way that you approach it, how you overcome the fear of cold calling, and then how you put in place a structured approach to cold calling so that you start to think about doing it and acting on it in a way that's much more engaging, keeps you fully motivated, and gives you the confidence to push through and persevere. Because that's the one thing about cold calling. The more you do it, the higher your likelihood of getting results. But also, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more confident you get to push a little bit on a conversation, to overcome some resistance from prospective customers and maybe some pushbacks. So I hope you enjoy this module. 13 key principles. You're going to join a live workshop, and then I'll just join you at the end just to kind of regroup and say, what do you need to do to change your approach to cold calling? Hope you enjoy this module. And we'll walk through this. There's it's 12 or 13 principles, so we'll talk about them, and then we'll just pause at the end and say, right, what does this mean, perhaps for you, for your business, and for the way that you approach cold calling. Principle number one, and this is really interesting. You know, if you look at the psychology of cold calling, it's really interesting because when you're cold calling, you naturally get a lot of rejection. And the rejection feels personal, even though it's not. And the person, remembering that we can't be physically harmed by the person on the end of the line, and actually we can only have our confidence damaged if we decide it's damaged, is a really useful reminder to ourselves. And when we recognize that it's part of the process, we naturally, I've said this to you all in the past, and that sales is a difficult role a lot of the time because we're getting more no's than yeses, even when we're dealing with solid opportunities. Even if you get qualified opportunities into your business, not all of them will convert, and in fact more will not convert than will. When you get to cold calling, it ramps up even higher. You end up with a lot more rejection than you get acceptance, and actually that does take quite a bit of reconditioning of ourselves. But there's this really interesting kind of principle around the danger. There is no actual danger in cold calling. It's just a process we go through where we're trying to engage customers. And sometimes that can be useful just to remind your teams there's no real danger, right? We're making cold calls, but there's no threat. And then I really like this. As you're starting a cold call, the first thing I tend to do with customers when I'm either cold calling or I'm calling someone and it's like not appointed, then first thing I do is check the time. So I'll say hi and say their name, say how you doing? I'm calling. Have you got a couple of minutes right now? And that's just for me, it's like a respect thing, just to demonstrate immediately that you're respecting that person's time. And I very rarely get someone that says no. They'll normally say, yeah, I've got a couple of minutes. And even if they say, well, I'm just about to go into a meeting, can you call me back? I'll then able to say, yeah, no problem. It was about this topic. What time's good for you? So you actually get this by checking the time. You either get a call, you either get expansion of the conversation then, or you're able to then tag it to, can I call you at a time that's good for you? And you get that follow-up. The reverse of that, and I've heard this done quite effectively as well, instead of do you have a couple of minutes to talk now, the reverse of that is I may have caught you at a bad time. I don't suppose you have a couple of minutes. Both are quite effective. And normally that surfaces someone who says, no, you're okay. I can give you a couple of minutes, but no more. And the amount of times I've been in a cold call situation where they say you've got a couple of minutes and no more, and then 15 minutes later, I'm the one saying, are you still okay for time? because we're still talking about, you know, the topic in the conversation. And then that links to this bit, you know, then make sure you keep checking they're okay for time throughout your conversation, because people, especially if you take, you know, we talk a lot about a question-led approach where we're asking questions, we're checking with customers, we are really curious about what's going on for them in their business. When you're doing that, they're the one doing most of the talking. So then they're the one that loses track of time. So actually to just keep saying to them throughout the conversation, you're still okay for time. Surprising how often people say, yeah, no, I'm okay. Actually, that's moved, that meeting's moved, or there's no one here at the moment, or they're running late or whatever, because there was never really something going on in a couple of minutes. They were just basically, if I was going to pitch at them, they wanted a reason to be able to get me off the phone. And because I'm not pitching at them, because I'm asking them questions, they're now more engaged. And the other thing about doing that is I found that when you do that, the next time you call, someone's much more likely to take your call, because they recognize that you're respectful of time. So you kind of improve the situation for the future as well. And we've talked a lot about this in today's call already, but remembering that rapport is like everything in a early sales conversation, because without rapport, people will not buy. They will only buy from people they like, as you remember we kind of said. So making sure that whoever that you're calling, early rapport is really, really crucial. They're much more likely to do business with us and engage and have a conversation if they like and trust us. So remember how we do that. Focus on common ground, show empathy, be interested in their situation and what's happening for them. They're the keys, okay? I also really like the idea of, and I do this more and more, I'm sure we've talked about, is assumed rapport. So when you're reaching out to someone kind of early in a conversation, whether that's cold or lukewarm, actually assuming that you're talking to them as if it's someone you know really well. And it's really interesting when you do that. So I could imagine I was talking to any one of you three guys, because we know each other pretty well now, right? I could just assume that when I'm ringing this person, it's someone I know really well. And it's surprising because it changes the way you interact with them. So it's much more friendly, it's much more personable, it's much more relaxed, it's much more engaging, because you feel as if you know them. And it's almost it's like a psychological trick you play on yourself more than anyone else. And that can be really useful. The other thing on this point is about setting, you know, for early conversations, set like smaller goals for each call. So it wouldn't necessarily be a sale. It might be, right, I'm going to find out that person's, if you don't know their name, you know, the preferred name, maybe some interest they have, maybe something that I didn't know about them, or something that they're prepared to share with me that I can use next time. And that's what we're really trying to do. And we also want to try and make this psychological switch in our minds from resistance to cold calling to engaging with cold calling, because for most people, they don't enjoy it, they don't have a positive association with it, and changing that association is really important. Then we've got warming the prospect up, so reminding ourselves that we should, especially if it's completely cold, make sure we've done some research on them and their business. Make sure we know the company, the industry, possible pain points, maybe mutual connections, maybe associations, things that you could start to join up the dots in that early conversation, so that you find common ground. And it makes you feel as if you're not reaching out in a way that's quite so cold. We really want that warm welcome from the customer. Steve talked about scripts for shows. I think, you know, when you're cold calling, actually having a script for the whole call, you don't necessarily have to follow the script, but actually the process of writing a script is really useful, because it helps to focus the way that you structure the call. Certainly, you know, what's the opening, what are the key points that you'll cover, what are some of the questions you'll ask, and then what's the next step, or how you'll close the call. And that's really useful, because having that allows you to keep a kind of structure and stay on track, but it allows you to flex if you need to, or you know, depending on the response from the person, you know, expand if you need to, contract the time if you need to as well. So, but scripting the call can be really useful. And then in particular, the first 10 seconds are the most important, because that's where we make the impact and get engagement or not. So first few seconds are really the most important. So it's a chance to get that person's attention, to practice the introduction, and do it in a way that is like so natural and confident that you can do it without even thinking. So if somebody kind of, and this is for your teams, I guess, as much as yourselves, somebody handed you a phone, you could literally just dial a number and feel confident to do it if you had the prep work done. And doing that in a way that's as concise and relevant is really important. Then there's the principle about the more you talk about yourself in cold calling, the worse you tend to do. And really thinking about a lot of the principles we talk about in this whole process. So avoid making that early conversation so much about you, as much as and as early as you can. Move it to the person you're talking to and what their needs are, asking questions, active listening. And if you get the chance to position the product, it should be high level to the specific challenges that they've said they have. Really remember our aim with a cold call is to get a warm reintroduction. That's really what we're looking to achieve. And then something that we obviously talk about a lot on these calls as well is focusing on challenges you're seeing with other customers. So we really want to normalize what they're experiencing. So sharing insights of other customers who've had similar challenges or run a similar business or in a similar role, and it demonstrates, I guess, unconsciously expertise, but it's also trying to put it into context that's real and not just you trying to sell them something. Then we think about asking them, getting them talking. Think about the questions that we ask. Remember our open question structure. So what or how, and really we're trying to get this early understanding. What is it they're trying to achieve? What are their problems? And how do we start to actually qualify whether or not there's an opportunity for us to add value to that customer? That's how we should be thinking about it. Cold calling is about almost qualifying us. Are we the right fit for that customer? Can only do that by understanding them and asking them those questions. Then thinking about what's really going on. So where you can, digging deeper into kind of issues, challenges, problems they're facing, so that actually the next step, a bit like we talked about with the show, we really want in those early conversations to identify the heart of the problem with the customer, so that we're able to then follow up and think about solution next. So we might do high level kind of elements of a solution, but actually the main aim of a cold call is there a need? Can we identify, real problem for the customer that we think we can help them solve? That becomes the next step. And so digging below the surface, if we can on a cold call, is really important. And then, next steps are always, kind of what we're trying to achieve. So that cold call is a gateway to the next meeting or next conversation. Can we get commitment from that person there and then to what that next step looks like? And more importantly, get to that next step that they're motivated to take. So we want them to feel as if they want to have a follow-up call with us, not that it's something we're kind of twisting their arm to do. And we do that through those questions and understanding and just making sure that what they're telling us is a fit for the solution that we can offer them. I'm, as you'll remember from our kind of immediate action stage, I'm a fan of thanking the customer for their time, making sure that you are respectful of their time as well. And whichever way the outcome of the call goes, whether they're interested or not, actually that last part of the conversation saying thank you is important, because you're representing the brand, representing the company, and you want the customer to have had a positive final experience with you regardless. So it also, with customers who have said no thanks, by thanking them for their time and appreciate their openness, you're also able then to leave the door open for a next call. That might be 3, 6, 12 months later, but if they have a final positive impression of you, it's much more likely they'll be receptive next time. And then the other thing about cold calling, it's a bit, actually, this is similar at shows. When you are on a roll, when you get people engaged, and you have a successful series of conversations or a successful series of calls, that's the time to keep going because that momentum builds. So sometimes we can have a couple of good calls and think, yes, done, I'm finished, I'm wrapping up. But actually, that is the time to just keep plowing on, because you're going to take that positive energy and that positive momentum into the next cold call. So actually setting yourself up for a run of decent quality conversations, positive conversations, is really useful, because it almost becomes self-fulfilling. So that there's about 12, 13 principles there. I'll just pause for a second and think, how these principles might change the approach to cold calling, and think about, what does this mean you or your teams might need to do differently going forward. So I hope you've enjoyed those 13 key principles. You'll have noticed they were in a live workshop, although it was mainly presentation. So I'd love to prompt this question to you then. So what are the key changes you now need to make as you approach cold calling with your clients? In particular, think about those people where you may have had some contact and it didn't materialize into a solid sales opportunity. How can you use this approach to revisit some of those customers, perhaps start to ask some of those questions you might have missed first time round, just to see if you can help them to start to articulate a problem that you can help them with? Feel free to share your ideas and feedback in the group. And if you're not in our sales mastermind groups and you'd like to be, then contact me and I'll happily talk to you about how to do that. Good luck with your cold calling efforts.